I never imagined that my own son, the boy I once taught to walk, to ride a bike, to be kind, would one day shove me so hard at the Christmas dinner table that I would crash to the floor in front of my grandchildren, just so his wealthy father-in-law could take my seat. The silence that followed that moment was louder than any scream. I remember the look in his eyes, cold, distant, proud, and in that single look, I realized something devastating. My son didn't just push me away from a chair, he pushed me out of his life. But what he didn't know was that the man he humiliated that night, the quiet old engineer he thought was harmless, had spent a lifetime building empires, not just families, and that before sunrise, I would make a decision that would change his life forever. By the next morning, he would wake up to 47 missed calls, and everything he thought he owned, his job, his house, his money, would be gone, because sometimes life doesn't shout its lessons, it whispers them through consequences. And yet, this isn't a story about revenge. It's about how one night of arrogance can destroy a lifetime of love, and how sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. You're about to hear a story that will make you question what family really means. A story filled with betrayal, heartbreak, justice, and something even deeper waiting at the end. Something you might not expect, because hidden behind all the pain there's a lesson, and maybe, just maybe. So before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, When Family Breaks, where we share true stories of love, loss, and redemption that will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. If you've ever loved someone who hurt you, or trusted someone who forgot who you are, this story is for you. Now, let's go back to that Christmas night, the night my son told me to get out of my own seat. He thought that was the end of my dignity. He had no idea. It was only the beginning of his awakening. It was December 24th, one of those cold Boston evenings when snow fell softly enough to make everything look peaceful, even when nothing really was. I had been looking forward to that night for weeks. It was supposed to be our first Christmas together since my wife, Eleanor, passed away 3 years ago. I had polished the silver frame that held her picture, wrapped small gifts for my grandchildren, and even brought along a bottle of wine she once loved, one I'd saved for a special occasion. When I pulled up in front of my son Ethan's house, I could see the warm lights glowing through the windows. The sound of carols floated out as I carried the gifts up the steps. My heart was full of that quiet kind of joy you only feel when you think you're finally going home. Grandpa Robert, 2 little voices ran toward me before I could even knock. Lily and Ben, 10 and 12, wrapped their arms around me, giggling. Their hugs were the purest thing left in my world. I held them tight, breathing in that sweet smell of childhood soap and Christmas cookies. For a moment, everything felt right again, but when I looked up, standing behind them in the doorway, was my daughter-in-law, Melissa. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Robert, you made it early," she said, brushing invisible crumbs from her red dress. "Ethan's still getting things ready." "Happy to help," I replied softly, handing her the gifts. "Where can I put these?" She hesitated, as if deciding whether my presence was an inconvenience or a photo opportunity. Just leave them by the tree for now." Inside, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Gold ribbons, perfect candles, every detail meticulously arranged. But underneath the perfection there was something else, a tension that made the air feel heavy. When Ethan finally appeared from the kitchen, he looked tired, but not in the way work makes you tired. His voice was clipped. "Hey, Dad, you found the place okay?" So I laughed softly. "I've only been coming here every Sunday for 10 years, son." He smiled, but it was hollow. Something inside me tightened. The table was already set, 8 seats. I counted quickly. Ethan, Melissa, the kids, and me. That made 5. "Expecting more guests?" I asked. Melissa looked up quickly, then away. "Yes, my father's joining us tonight. He's bringing a few business associates." "Charles?" I asked, surprised. Didn't he usually spend Christmas in Aspen? He changed his plans, she said. Her tone carried the weight of something unspoken. When Charles arrived an hour later, the mood shifted instantly. My son, the same man who'd barely looked at me, lit up like he'd been waiting for royalty. Mr. Harrison. Merry Christmas. Come in, please. He rushed to take his coat, pulled out his chair, poured his wine before anyone else's. I stood there watching, trying to ignore the sting of seeing my son treat another man with the kind of respect he once reserved for me. Charles was charming in that practiced way powerful men often are. He shook my hand politely, his grip firm but distant. Robert, always good to see you. How's retirement treating you? I forced a smile. Quiet, but I can't complain. He nodded, his attention already drifting back to Ethan. Dinner was served soon after. I took my usual seat, the one at the end of the table, beside my son. It had always been mine. It was where I'd sat when I carved the turkey every year after Eleanor died, where I told the grandchildren stories, where we toasted to family. But as Charles approached the table, something changed in Ethan's expression. He looked at me with a discomfort I couldn't quite read until he spoke. Dad, I need you to move, I blinked. I'm sorry? That seat, he said, lowering his voice. It's for Mr. Harrison. He's our guest of honor. I thought he was joking, but the silence that followed said otherwise. Melissa looked down at her plate. Even the children stopped talking. Ethan, I said softly, I've always sat here. It's tradition. Traditions change, he replied. His tone was sharp, impatient. Please, Dad, don't make this awkward. Awkward, that word sliced through me like glass. I could have stood up quietly. I could have let it go. But something in me refused to surrender the last symbol of belonging I had left. Son, I said, voice trembling, this isn't just a chair. He sighed heavily, exasperated. Dad, for God's sake, just move. And before I could react, his hands were on my shoulders, and he shoved. It wasn't a violent push, not the kind meant to hurt, but for a man my age. It didn't take much. I stumbled backward, my knee hit the chair leg, and I went down hard onto the cold tile floor. The room froze. The sound of my grandchildren gasping was the only thing that moved. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Ethan's voice came again. Flat, detached. This seat's for my father-in-law. Get out. I stayed there on the floor, staring up at my son, the boy who once climbed onto my shoulders to watch fireworks, now looking down at me as if I were a burden. Ben ran toward me. Grandpa, are you okay? I'm fine, buddy, I whispered, forcing a smile as I stood with their help, but inside, something broke. I took a side chair away from the table while Charles sat in my place. Dinner went on as if nothing had happened. Ethan laughed at Charles's jokes. Melissa kept pouring wine. I just sat there, invisible, listening to the clinking of glasses and wondering when my family stopped being mine. And somewhere between the laughter and the silence, a thought began to form, cold, clear, unshakable. Maybe love isn't always enough. Maybe sometimes the only way to save your son is to let him lose everything first. That night, after everyone finished their dessert and laughter returned to the table, laughter I couldn't recognize anymore, I excused myself quietly. I'm just going to the restroom for a moment, I said. No one looked up. I walked down the hallway slowly, the sound of their voices fading behind me. In the mirror, I saw a man I barely knew, a man with gray hair, a trembling jaw and eyes that no longer carried warmth, only clarity. My reflection asked me a question I'd avoided for years. When did you stop being his father and start being his wallet? I shut the door, locked it, and took a deep breath. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my old phone. Not the smartphone Ethan had given me 2 Christmases ago to keep up with the times, but my old flip phone, the one with numbers I still remembered by heart. The first call was to Henry Lawson, my attorney for over 30 years. His voice sounded tired, half asleep. Robert, it's Christmas Eve. I know, Henry. I need you to prepare new papers first thing in the morning. Papers for what? To revoke every power of attorney my son has in the company. All of them. No exceptions. He paused for a long time. Robert, are you sure? That would strip him of every executive right. I'm sure, I said softly. And Henry, cancel every personal guarantee I've ever signed for him. The house, the car, the company credit lines, everything. Silence again. Then a sigh. I'll take care of it, he said. I could almost hear his respect through the phone. The second call was to Linda Brooks, my accountant, the kind of woman who never forgets a number or a promise. She picked up on the second ring. Mr. Miller. Mary, Linda, I need you to freeze all joint accounts with Ethan, suspend his salary, block his access to corporate funds, and first thing tomorrow call Chase Bank and notify them the guarantees are cancelled. There was a quiet inhale. Understood, sir. May I ask why? Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's permission to be ungrateful. The third call was the hardest. It was to Daniel Morris, my old operations director, a man I once pulled out of bankruptcy and trusted like a brother. Dan, I said, I need you to be at the office early tomorrow. Of course. What's going on? I want you to remove all of Ethan's personal things from the CEO's office. Files, photographs, everything. Then place a note on the desk that says, "This office is not for you." There was a long silence, then he said quietly, I never thought I'd see this day. Neither did I whispered. But tonight my son showed me who he is. Tomorrow, I'll show him who I am. When I hung up the phone, my hands were trembling, not from anger, but from a strange calm that comes when you finally stop pretending everything's fine. Sat on the edge of the tub and listened to the faint laughter echoing down the hallway, VT. Sound that used to warm me now felt hollow. Every chuckle, every toast, every Merry Christmas carried the weight of betrayal I could no longer ignore. In the quiet of that small bathroom, I made a promise to myself and to Eleanor, whose photo I still carried in my wallet. No more protecting him from consequences, I whispered. You taught me to raise a man, not a prince. I left the bathroom with a steady heart. The dinner table was filled with conversation about business mergers and markets. Trends. Ethan and Charles spoke as if I didn't exist. Melissa smiled too widely, as if trying to prove something. The children, bless their hearts, looked lost. When I sat down again, I caught Ethan saying, Charles, I've been thinking a merger between our companies could really expand our reach. My fork froze mid-air. A merger? Between my company and his father-in-law's? Without a single word to me? I turned my head slowly. Did I hear that right, Ethan? He looked at me with that same tired irritation. Oh, yeah, Dad, just some business talk. You wouldn't understand the newer models. It was as if he had forgotten who built those models, who spent decades designing, testing, perfecting every system that made his success possible. I said nothing. Silence can be louder than fury. After dessert, I stood. I should get going. Long drive ahead. Sure, Dad, he said casually without looking up. No hug. Oh, thank you, just indifference. But as I reached for my coat, I felt a small hand tug at mine. It was Lily. Grandpa, can you stay until we open presents? Her big brown eyes searched mine. I bent down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Not tonight, sweetheart. Grandpa has some important work to do. She frowned. On Christmas? Yes, Angel. On Christmas. Outside, the air was freezing, but for the first time that night, I felt warmth returning to my chest. It wasn't joy, it was purpose. As snow crunched beneath my shoes, I looked back at the house one last time. Through the window, I saw Ethan pouring Charles another drink, laughing like a man who thought he owned the world. He had no idea that by morning, the world he thought he owned would no longer belong to him. Sometimes love looks like kindness, and sometimes love looks like letting someone fall hard enough to finally learn how to stand. The morning after Christmas always used to be my favorite time of year. The quiet, the smell of leftover cinnamon rolls, the laughter of my grandchildren tearing through wrapping paper, but not this time. When I woke that morning, it wasn't to the sound of carols or children's laughter. It was to the sound of my phone vibrating endlessly on the nightstand. 47 missed calls. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened to one of the kids. Then I remembered something had happened. I had set it in motion myself. The first voicemail came from Ethan's personal banker. "Mr. Miller, we're trying to confirm a change in authorization for your accounts. Your father's name has been removed as guarantor. Please call us immediately." The second was from his car leasing company. The third from a lender. Then another and another, each one more desperate than the last. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the snow fall. Boston was still asleep, peaceful, unaware that inside one house across town, an empire built on pride was beginning to collapse. I could picture him waking up late, as he always did after a night of whiskey and self-congratulation, scrolling through his phone in confusion as the storm of messages hit. And that's exactly what happened. At 9:30 that morning, Ethan's world began to unravel. He came downstairs in his robe, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake off the hangover. Melissa was already pacing the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. "What do you mean frozen?" she hissed. "That's my joint account. I can't even pay the nanny." "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. She turned on him. "You tell me. Every credit card we own is declined. The bank says your father canceled all the guarantees." "What does that even mean?" Ethan blinked, confused. "He wouldn't do that." "It's Christmas Day." Before she could answer, his phone rang again. "Mr. Miller, this is Wells Fargo. We need immediate payment for your business line of credit. The guarantor has been withdrawn. Without it, your balance is due in full." He hung up. Another call came. And another. "Mr. Miller, the mortgage on your primary residence is now in default. Mr. Miller, your corporate card is suspended. Mr. Miller, we're repossessing the BMW today." His hands started to shake. "There's some mistake," he whispered. "It's a system error." Melissa's face drained of color. "It's not a system error. Your father did this." Ethan stared at her. "No, he wouldn't. He loves me." She crossed her arms. "He loved you, Ethan. Before you shoved him onto the floor like he was nothing. Before you humiliated him in front of your children." He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He could still see the image in his mind. His father on the floor, the kids crying, Charles sitting silently at the table. For the first time, shame began to seep through the cracks of his arrogance. The phone buzzed again. His assistant. "Ethan, I'm so sorry, but your office access card isn't working. Security says you've been removed from the system." He swallowed hard. "Removed? Your name's no longer listed as CEO. Daniel Morris is acting CEO effective immediately." His chest tightened. "That's impossible." "I saw the memo myself," she said softly. "It was signed by your father." The phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Melissa just stood there, arms folded, silent. The children came down the stairs, still in their pajamas. "Daddy, are we opening presents?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at her, then at the tree, and finally at the mountain of unopened boxes beneath it. He nodded weakly. "Go ahead, sweetheart." They tore into the wrapping paper, laughing, oblivious to the disaster unfolding around them. And in that strange, painful contrast, their joy against his collapse, something inside him broke. His phone buzzed one last time. It was from an unknown number. "Ethan," the voice said when he answered, "this is Daniel. I thought you should hear it from me. I've been asked to inform you that all your personal belongings from the office have been packed. You'll find a note on your desk." "What note?" There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice softened. "It says this office is not for you." Ethan closed his eyes. The words echoed back to him like thunder. "This seat is for my father-in-law." Get out. And now his father had returned those same words with surgical precision. Melissa spoke quietly. You did this to yourself? He shook his head. I can fix it. I'll talk to him. She laughed bitterly. Talk to him? After what you did? He won't even look at you. But Ethan didn't answer. He grabbed his coat and keys, his heart pounding, his pride fighting its last battle against panic. Outside, snow fell thicker now. The driveway was empty, his BMW already towed. He climbed into Melissa's SUV and drove straight toward the company headquarters. Every red light felt like punishment. Every turn, a reminder of how quickly comfort can vanish when it's built on borrowed respect. When he reached the office, security buzzed him in with blank expressions. No one spoke. No one even looked him in the eye. Upstairs, he burst into the executive suite. His nameplate was gone. In its place, Daniel Morris, acting CEO. His office door was open. The desk was bare except for one small note in familiar handwriting. This office is not for you. He stood there, silent, staring at the words that mirrored his own cruelty. The same sentence he'd used to cast out his father had now been carved into the ruin of his own pride. For a long time, he didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then finally he whispered the truth aloud. He warned me, and I never listened. He left the building with his head down, the snow wetting his hair, and for the first time in his adult life, he realized what it felt like to be truly alone. Ethan drove through the snow-covered streets of Boston like a man possessed. His thoughts ran faster than the wheels beneath him. He had lost his job, his home, his car, everything that had ever made him feel powerful. But somewhere inside, a desperate voice still whispered, "There's one person who can fix this." His father-in-law, Charles Harrison, the man whose approval Ethan had chased for years, whose respect he thought could fill the void his father's love once occupied. If anyone could save him now, it had to be Charles. He parked in front of the Harrison estate, a mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. The iron gates opened slowly, as if deciding whether he was worthy of entry. When the butler answered, Ethan's voice cracked. "Please. Tell Mr. Harrison I need to see him. It's urgent." Minutes later, he stood inside the grand study, a room filled with dark wood, old books and silent judgment. Charles was behind his desk, reading a document with perfect calm, a glass of scotch beside him. He didn't stand when Ethan entered. "Charles," Ethan began, trying to control his breathing. Something's happened. My father, he's destroyed everything. I need your help." Charles lifted his gaze slowly. His eyes, gray and sharp, revealed nothing. "Destroyed everything?" he repeated as if tasting the words. "Or simply corrected it?" Ethan froze. "You don't understand. He's taken everything from me. The accounts, the house, the company. It's all gone overnight." "Yes," Charles said evenly. "I heard." "You heard." Ethan's voice cracked. "Then you know I'm ruined. You know I can't pay the mortgage, can't even buy groceries for your daughter, your grandchildren." Charles leaned back in his chair. "And whose fault is that, Ethan?" "My father's," he shouted. "He lost his mind. On Christmas Eve of all nights." Charles's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "No." "Ethan, you lost yours." The room fell silent outside. Snow fell against the windows like small fists of truth. Charles set down his pen and stood. "Do you even realize what you did? You shoved your own father to the ground in front of your children, in front of me, and then told him to get out. You called me the guest of honor, remember?" Ethan swallowed hard. His voice faltered. "I was just trying to show respect." "Respect?" Charles repeated, his tone slicing through the air. "You don't earn respect by humiliating your father. You earn it by being the kind of man he could be proud of." Ethan's lips trembled. "Charles, please. I know I made a mistake, but I was under pressure. The business, the merger, you know how much that meant to me." Charles's gaze hardened. "The merger?" He walked slowly around the desk until he was standing right in front of Ethan. "You mean the merger you planned to push through without your father's approval? Using my influence to get what you wanted?" Ethan tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Charles sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. "I saw a side of you that night. Ethan, arrogant, desperate, cruel. I told myself it was the drink, the stress. But now I see it's who you really are." Ethan shook his head violently. "No, that's not true. I was angry. You saw how he treats me, always acting like I'll never be enough." "Enough?" Charles interrupted sharply. "You had everything. A thriving company, a beautiful home, 2 children who adored you, and a father who would have given his last breath for you." Ethan lowered his head. His voice broke. "I thought he'd always be there, no matter what. And that," Charles said quietly, "is the problem with sons who are given too much. They mistake patience for weakness." He walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered garden. "When I was your age, my father disowned me for walking away from his business. It took me 10 years to earn back his respect. 10 years of hard work, failure, and humility. I learned that a man's character isn't shown when he wins, but when he loses." He turned back, eyes piercing. "Your father just handed you that same lesson in one night." Ethan's knees went weak. He sank into a chair. "Please, Charles. I can't do this alone. You have connections. You could speak to him. Maybe if it comes from you." Charles raised a hand, silencing him. "I already spoke to him." Ethan's heart skipped. You did?" "Yes," Charles said. "Yesterday afternoon. I called him to apologize for witnessing that disgraceful scene." Ethan stared in disbelief. "You apologized to him?" "Of course," Charles said calmly. "They deserved it. And do you know what else I did?" Ethan didn't answer. "I offered him a partnership." The room seemed to tilt. "A partnership?" Ethan stammered. Charles nodded. "Michael and I will be merging our companies, but under one condition. Your name will never appear on a single document." Ethan felt his world tilt again, colder than before. "You're siding with him?" "After everything, I'm siding with integrity," Charles said firmly. "You betrayed the one man who gave you everything, and now you expect me to trust you with mine." He picked up the glass of scotch and took a slow sip. "My daughter and grandchildren will always have my support. But you, Ethan, you'll have to learn what it means to earn respect, not demand it." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "So that's it? You're cutting me off too?" Charles nodded slowly. "Not out of hate." "Out of mercy." Ethan blinked. "Mercy?" "Yes, because men like you only grow when there's nothing left to stand on." He walked to the door and opened it. "Go home, Ethan. Face what you've done. Maybe one day, when you've rebuilt yourself from nothing, you'll understand why your father did what he did." Ethan rose shakily, his pride crumbling into silence. He tried to speak, but no words came. When he stepped outside, the cold wind hit him like judgment itself. Behind him, the door closed with a soft final click. He stood there in the snow, staring at the mansion that once symbolized power and approval. Now it was just another door closed in his face. He thought about his father again, how easily he'd brushed him aside at that dinner table. How easily life had brushed him aside now. And for the first time, Ethan began to wonder if losing everything was the only way to finally learn what being a man truly meant. That night, Ethan sat alone in the dark, the flickering light of the Christmas tree casting long shadows across the empty living room. The laughter that once filled this space was gone. The presents under the tree remained unopened, a cruel reminder of what the day had taken from him. He stared at his phone, scrolling through his contacts. His father's number was still there, Dad, home, though he knew calling it now would be pointless. Still, he hovered over the name for a long moment as if willing it to ring on its own. Nothing did. Only silence. Melissa came downstairs quietly, her face pale and tired. She had been crying. He could see it in the redness around her eyes. In her hand was a folded piece of paper. "Ethan," she began softly, "we need to talk." His stomach tightened. "What now?" She hesitated, then placed the paper on the coffee table. "I spoke to my father today." He didn't look up. "I already know what he said." Her voice cracked slightly. "He told me everything. He told me how he offered your father a partnership, how he apologized for what you did." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "Of course he did. Everyone's on his side now." Melissa's tone hardened. "Because he's right, Ethan. You pushed your own father to the ground, in front of your children, in front of me. You humiliated him and called it respect." He turned toward her, his voice rising. "You think I don't regret it? You think I wanted this?" "No," she said quietly. "You just never thought there'd be consequences." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. For once there was no excuse that made sense anymore. Melissa took a deep breath. "The bank called me this afternoon. The mortgage is officially in default. We have 24 hours to vacate." Ethan rubbed his temples. "I'll fix it. I'll talk to my father. I'll make him see reason." She shook her head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about reason. It's about respect. He gave you everything, and you used it to destroy him." Her voice broke. "And now you've destroyed us too." Ethan stood pacing the room. "So that's it? You're leaving me?" She nodded slowly. "I have to. For the kids." He froze. "Melissa, please. You can't take them away." Her eyes glistened. "I can't let them see you like this, Ethan. Angry, bitter, blaming everyone else. They need stability, and right now you can't give them that." He moved toward her, desperate. "Melissa, we can fix this. I just need time." She took a step back. "You've had years of time, years of chances, and every one of them you chose pride over love." He sank into the couch, his voice breaking. "I never wanted to lose you." "I know," she whispered. "But wanting isn't enough." For a long while neither of them spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the muffled hum of wind outside. Then small footsteps creaked on the stairs. Lily appeared first, clutching her stuffed bear. Ben followed behind, his expression solemn. "Mom?" Lily asked, rubbing her eyes. "Why are you crying?" Melissa knelt, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges. "Sweetheart, we're going to stay with Grandpa Charles for a little while, okay?" Lily frowned. "What about Daddy?" Melissa hesitated. "Daddy needs some time to fix things." Ben looked between them, eyes full of worry. "Is it because of what happened to Grandpa Robert?" Ethan flinched at the name. Melissa swallowed hard. "Yes, but Daddy's learning from it." Ben crossed his arms. "Grandpa didn't deserve that, Dad." "I know," Ethan said softly. "I was wrong." The boy's eyes narrowed in quiet judgment, far too wise for his age. "You should tell him that." "I can't," Ethan whispered. "He won't talk to me." Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Then write him a letter." Her innocent words hit him like a knife. For a moment he just stared at her, speechless. Melissa stood and gently guided the children upstairs. "Say goodbye to your father," she told them. Ben walked over first, hesitant but sincere. "I hope you fix it, Dad." "I will," Ethan said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then Lily ran into his arms. "I love you, Daddy." He held her tightly, his throat burning. "I love you too, baby girl. More than anything." And just like that, they were gone. He stood at the window as the car drove away, its red taillights disappearing into the snow. The house was silent again, not peaceful, but hollow. He looked around at the remnants of his once perfect life, the expensive furniture, the decorations, the empty bottles from last night. All the things he'd thought made him powerful now looked meaningless. On the floor lay the folded paper Melissa had left behind. He picked it up and opened it. It was a temporary separation agreement. Her lawyer's signature already inked at the bottom. At that moment, something inside him shattered completely. He sank to his knees, the paper crumpling in his hand, and for the first time in years, he cried. Not the quiet tears of frustration, but the raw, broken sobs of a man who finally realized what he'd done. He cried for his father, for his wife, for the children he'd just watched disappear into the night. And maybe, somewhere deep down, he cried for the version of himself he'd never become. When the tears finally stopped, dawn was beginning to break outside. The tree lights flickered weakly, their glow fading as the morning light crept in. Ethan whispered to the empty room, "You were right, Dad, every bit of it. For the first time, those words didn't taste like defeat. They tasted like the truth. And the truth, however painful, was the first thing he had left that was real." The first week after Melissa and the kids left was a blur, a mix of silence, unpaid bills and unanswered calls. Ethan stayed in that empty house until the electricity was cut off and the bank's final notice arrived taped to the door. Then came the eviction. 2 strangers carried out his furniture while he stood in the snow, holding one suitcase and a lifetime of regret. He didn't fight it. For the first time in his life, he didn't argue, didn't shout. He just watched quietly as the home that had once symbolized success turned into someone else's problem. He checked into a small motel off Tremont Street. The carpet smelled like bleach, and the heater rattled all night. But at least it was shelter. He had $300 left, enough for a few days of rent and a couple of meals if he was careful. He opened his laptop and sent out resume after resume, hundreds of them. Former CEO, the subject lines all said, but no one called back. Every construction company in Boston knew the story by now. The son who pushed his father to the floor, the man who had lost everything in one night. By the end of the week, even the motel clerk started giving him pitying looks. He spent hours walking through the city, watching men in suits rush to meetings, passing restaurants where he once dined with investors, pretending not to see his reflection in the glass. One afternoon, he saw a sign in the window of a small cleaning company. Night shift janitor wanted, no experience necessary. He stared at it for a long time, then he walked in. Behind the counter sat a woman in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and a Boston accent that softened her every word. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here about the job," Ethan said quietly. She looked him up and down, his worn coat, his tired eyes. "Ever done janitorial work before?" He shook his head. "No, but I learned fast." "What did you do before this?" she asked, glancing at the blank space on the application form. Ethan hesitated. "Construction, it wasn't a lie." "Just not the whole truth." She studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Name's Brenda. The work's hard. The pay's $1,200 a month. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Think you can handle it?" He nodded. "I can handle it." "Good," she said. "You start tomorrow. Don't be late. We don't do second chances here." For the first time in months, he felt something unexpected, gratitude. The next night, Ethan put on the blue uniform Brenda handed him. It smelled of detergent and possibility. He took the subway downtown and started his first shift cleaning. Corporate offices. The same kind of offices where he once sat at a mahogany desk, signing contracts worth millions. Now, he emptied trash bins, mopped marble floors, and scrubbed toilets until his back ached. The first week was brutal. His hands blistered, his body screamed for rest, and his pride burned like an open wound. But each night, as he wiped fingerprints off glass doors and vacuumed hallways under the dim hum of fluorescent lights, something in him began to shift. There was no boardroom ego here. No one cared about last names or bank accounts. All that mattered was effort, and for once, Ethan had nothing left to prove, only something to rebuild. He started making friends with the night crew, Miguel from Ecuador, who worked 2 jobs to send money home, Sharon, a single mother studying nursing during the day, and Mr. Thompson, a quiet older man who always brought an extra sandwich just in case someone forgot dinner. They didn't know his story. To them, he was just Ethan, the new guy with calloused hands and tired eyes. One night during break, Miguel asked him, "So what did you do before this?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Made a lot of mistakes," Miguel laughed. "Then you fit right in." It was the first real laugh Ethan had in months. As weeks turned into months, his body grew stronger, his mind quieter. The rhythm of honest work became a strange kind of therapy. He learned to take pride in small things. A perfectly polished floor, a streak-free window, a compliment from Brenda when she said, "You're doing good work, Miller. Keep it up." He'd walk home at dawn, exhausted but calm, with the faint satisfaction of a man earning his life back one shift at a time. Sometimes, while cleaning the top floor of the Wellsworth building, he'd pause by the giant windows overlooking the city skyline. He remembered sitting in offices like these, looking down at the same streets, believing he was untouchable. Now he looked up, and the view felt different, cleaner, more honest. Each night he returned to his tiny rented room in Dorchester, where he'd taped a single photo to the wall, Lily and Ben. Laughing in the snow, he'd stare at it before sleeping, whispering, "Someday, you'll be proud of me again." Then, one evening, Brenda approached him after shift change. "I'm giving you a raise," she said. "You've earned it. I want you to supervise the night crew at our new site, the Klein Tower downtown." Ethan blinked. "Me? A supervisor?" She grinned. "Don't let the title fool you. It just means more responsibility and a little more pay. You've shown you can be trusted, and that's rare." Trusted, a word he hadn't heard directed at him in a long time. He accepted the promotion quietly, thanking her with a handshake that nearly trembled. That night, walking to the subway with the city lights glowing above him, Ethan realized something he hadn't before. For years he'd chased power and prestige, thinking they defined him. But now, sweeping hallways in the dark, he felt more like a man than he ever had in a tailored suit. He wasn't rich anymore. He wasn't admired. But he was finally real, and though his father's forgiveness was still far away, for the first time since that night, Ethan felt he was walking, went slowly, painfully, humbly, toward it. Spring came slowly that year. Boston thawed from its winter silence, and with it, Ethan's life began to breathe again. 3 months had passed since he'd started working at the Klein Tower. The pain in his back had dulled into strength, and the calluses on his hands no longer hurt. He had learned the value of rhythm, how quiet, steady effort could build something more lasting than pride. Every night, he led his small crew through the empty corridors, making sure every surface gleamed before dawn. They respected him, not for his name, but for how he worked beside them. Brenda noticed it too. "You've changed, Miller," she told him one evening while checking the supply list. "Most people come in here thinking this job's beneath them. You make it look like it matters." He smiled faintly. "It does matter," she nodded. "You keep this up and you'll have your own site before summer." That night, as he scrubbed the floors of the executive level, he looked out the window at the glowing skyline and whispered to himself, "I don't need to be a CEO anymore. I just need to be someone I can live with." But fate has a strange sense of timing, because the very next week, life decided to test him. It was a Thursday evening, and Ethan's team had just started the shift. He was assigned to clean the 31st floor, a level reserved for corporate clients who rented luxury offices for private meetings. When the elevator doors opened, the sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Through the glass wall at the far end of the corridor, he saw 2 men standing over a spread of architectural blueprints. One of them was unmistakable. Robert Miller, his father. Ethan froze. Time seemed to stretch. His father looked older. Yes, but stronger somehow, his back straight, his gestures confident, his presence commanding in a way Ethan hadn't seen in years. Standing beside him was Charles Harrison, his father-in-law, laughing easily as they reviewed the plans. The irony was almost unbearable. The two men whose approval Ethan had fought for his whole life, now partners, working together as equals. The merger he had once schemed for had happened anyway. Without him, he felt his heart pounding in his chest. Should he leave? Should he hide? But his feet wouldn't move. From the shadows he could see the warmth between them. Charles leaned over the table. "Robert, these projections are solid. You always were the best when it came to the details." Robert chuckled softly. "And you always had the vision." "Maybe we should have done this years ago." They both laughed. It wasn't the sharp, political laughter of businessmen. It was real, easy, and it hurt. Ethan turned away, gripping his mop tightly. He didn't want to interrupt. He didn't want to be seen. But as he moved toward the elevator, the rubber sole of his shoe squeaked against the floor. Both men turned. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Robert's eyes met his son's. There were no words, no accusations, no excuses, just a single, heavy look, filled with something Ethan couldn't name. Recognition, sadness, maybe even mercy. Ethan lowered his gaze immediately. "I'm sorry," he whispered, almost too softly for anyone to hear. Then he turned and pushed the cleaning cart toward the elevator, his hands trembling. Behind him, Robert stood still. Charles glanced at him. "Do you want me to—" Robert shook his head. "No, let him go." But as Ethan disappeared into the elevator, Robert's eyes lingered on the doors long after they closed. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his small apartment. Staring at the ceiling, the image of his father's face haunted him, not with anger, but with a quiet grief that cut deeper than any punishment. He realized something painful but true. His father hadn't destroyed him out of revenge. He'd done it out of love, a love strong enough to let him fall far enough to finally learn. The next morning, Ethan went to work early. He asked Brenda for a few minutes before the shift. "Brenda," he said, "I need a favor." She raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "I need a few hours off next Sunday morning, just something personal." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "You've earned it. Go do what you need to do." That Sunday, Ethan took the subway across town. He wore his cleanest shirt, the one without bleach stains, and carried a small envelope in his hand. When he reached his father's house, he didn't ring the doorbell. He just slipped the envelope into the mailbox and stood there for a long moment, looking at the windows that once glowed with family warmth. Then he walked away. Inside that envelope was a letter. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't try to explain. It simply said, "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this, but I want you to know I'm working now, really working. Earn my place every day. I'm not the man I was last Christmas. I'm finally learning the lesson you tried to teach me my whole life. Thank you for letting me fall, because it's the only way I could learn how to stand." Ethan, he didn't sign it with "your son." He wasn't sure he still deserved the title. That afternoon, when Robert checked his mail, he found the envelope. He read the letter slowly, then folded it back with trembling hands. Charles was there for a meeting and saw the look on his face. "Everything okay?" Charles asked gently. Robert smiled faintly. "For the first time in a while." "Yes." He placed the letter on his desk and stared out the window, watching the spring sunlight spill across the city. He whispered softly to himself, "He's learning." The winter wind returned to Boston a year after that fateful Christmas. Cold, sharp, and honest. Ethan walked home from his night shift through the quiet streets, the snow crunching beneath his worn boots. His breath rose in clouds, and though his hands were rough and calloused, they no longer trembled. It had been 12 months since he last spoke to his father. 12 months since the night that shattered everything and rebuilt him piece by piece. His life was simple now, a small apartment in Dorchester, a steady job that paid enough for rent and groceries. No luxury, No grandeur, but there was peace. He didn't chase approval anymore. He earned self-respect instead. Each Sunday afternoon, he called his children. Ben had joined the school's robotics team, and Lily had started piano lessons. Their laughter was his salvation, and every "I love you, Daddy" was a reminder that even broken men could still be loved. Then, one night after finishing his shift at the Klein Tower, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Ben. "Dad, Grandpa asked about you today." He froze in place, the mop still in his hand. "He did?" He typed back. "Yeah. He asked if you were okay, if you had a job, if you were eating well. We told him you were doing fine." He didn't say much after that. Just smiled and said, "Good." Ethan stared at the screen until the words blurred. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was hope. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, watching the city lights flicker through falling snow, and something inside him whispered, "It's time." He opened a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. Not an apology. Not a plea, but a confession of gratitude. "Dear Dad, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it. A year ago, I was a man who believed success was measured in money, status, and control. I thought being your son meant I deserved everything you built. I was wrong. When you let me fall, I thought you were being cruel, but now I understand. It was the kindest thing you ever did for me. You took away everything I had so I could learn what truly mattered. This year I've scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, and cleaned windows high above the city. Each night I watch the lights from those offices where men like I once was still chase power. I used to be one of them. Now I clean up after them. And you know what, Dad? I'm grateful. Because for the first time I understand what honest work feels like. What dignity really means. I used to think humility was weakness, but it's not. It's strength. The quiet kind that builds slowly without applause. I have a small apartment now. The walls are thin, and the furniture's second-hand. But it's mine. Paid with my own hands. And when I wake up, there's peace. I've learned to cook for myself. I've learned that happiness doesn't come from ownership, but from gratitude. I've learned that being a father means showing up, even when you're ashamed. Ben and Lily are doing well. They miss you. They talk about you often, how wise you are, how kind. And every time they do, I realize how blind I was to the man standing in front of me all those years. If I could go back, I wouldn't beg for your forgiveness. I'd beg for one more conversation. To listen this time, not argue. To learn instead of boast. You once told me, a man isn't defined by what he owns, but by what he does when he loses it all. Now I finally understand what you meant. You didn't raise a failure. You raised a man who had to fall to learn how to stand on his own. Thank you for letting me fall, Dad, because only through the fall did I find my footing. With love, always, your son, Ethan. He read the letter 3 times before folding it neatly and slipping it into an envelope. No return address. No phone number. Just his father's name and the home he'd built brick by brick. The next morning, on Christmas Eve, he mailed it. Then he went to work. Same as always. Days passed, weeks, winter deepened. Then one morning, as he was preparing his cleaning supplies for another shift, Brenda approached him with a small envelope in her hand. "This came for you," she said. Dropped off by courier. Ethan frowned. "For me?" The envelope was plain, marked only with his name, Ethan Miller. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in a familiar, steady hand. He unfolded it slowly. "Ethan, I received your letter. I read it more than once. In your words, I saw the man I always hoped you'd become. I am proud, not of what you were, but of what you are becoming. The measure of a man isn't in how high he climbs, but in how he stands after the fall. And you, my son, are finally standing. I'm not ready for coffee or long talks. Not yet. But I would like to meet your children at the park this Sunday like we used to. If you wish to come, bring yourself too. Love, Dad." Ethan's hands trembled. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief so deep it felt like breathing for the first time. He folded the letter against his chest, whispering, "Thank you, Dad." That Sunday, under the grey winter sky, Ethan saw him. Robert stood by the park bench, scarf around his neck, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. When their eyes met, neither spoke. Ben and Lily ran to their grandfather's arms, laughter echoing through the cold air. And as they hugged, Robert looked up and met Ethan's gaze. There was no anger there, no judgment, only quiet pride and something softer, forgiveness. Ethan walked closer. Slow and uncertain, Robert handed him the 2nd cup of cocoa. "Cold morning," his father said simply. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but it feels warm." They stood side by side, watching the children play in the snow. No grand speeches, no apologies, just 2 men, a father and a son, sharing silence that said everything words could not. For the first time in years, Ethan felt whole again. He hadn't reclaimed his old life. He'd built a better one, and as snowflakes drifted gently around them, he whispered quietly, "Merry Christmas." "Dad?" Robert smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Merry Christmas, son." And in that moment, a story that began with pride and ended in humility finally found its peace. If you believe in second chances, share this story with someone who needs one. And remember, sometimes the greatest gifts aren't wrapped in paper but in forgiveness. They say love protects, but the truth is, sometimes love lets you fall, not because it wants to see you break, but because it knows that breaking is the only way you'll finally learn how to stand. That's what happened to Ethan and his father. Their love wasn't lost that Christmas night. It was buried under pride, pain, and years of unspoken words. But time, hardship, and humility dug it back up. And what they found wasn't the same love they'd once had. It was stronger, quieter, real. Ethan learned that forgiveness doesn't always come wrapped in words. Sometimes it lives in the small moments, in a shared cup of coffee, in the laughter of children, in a simple Merry Christmas whispered through trembling voices. He had spent his whole life chasing power, only to find peace in the simplest things, the rhythm of honest work, the smell of fresh coffee, and the steady presence of a father who loved him enough to let him fail. And Robert. He learned something too, that love doesn't end when a son disappoints his father. It just changes form, from protection to patience, from control to trust, from giving to letting go. That winter morning in the park, as snow fell softly around them, they didn't rebuild what was broken. They built something new, something better, because love, when it survives pride, becomes something sacred. Maybe that's the real meaning of redemption. It's not about getting back what you lost. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs what once defined you. It's about learning that forgiveness is never owed. It's earned through the quiet consistency of change. So if you've ever been hurt by someone you love, or if you've hurt someone and don't know how to make it right, remember this story. Remember that love can be silent. For a while it can seem gone, but it's never truly lost if you're willing to change. Because sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who stop saving us so that we can finally save ourselves. And when you do, you'll understand what Ethan did that winter morning, that falling was never the end. It was the beginning of becoming. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to When Family Breaks, a place where true stories of loss, forgiveness, and second chances remind us that love, real love, never truly disappears. It just waits for us to grow into it. Until next time, remember, sometimes the fall is the gift.